I'm Jim Collison and live from the Gallup campus here in Omaha, Nebraska. This is Gallup's Theme Thursday, Season 3. The season premiere recorded on January 19th, 2017. Theme Thursday is a Gallup webcast series that dives deep into the CliftonStrengths Finder themes, one theme at a time, and today is Season 3 launch. If you have questions, comments, or contributions during this webcast, we do have a live chat room that's available for you right below the main video window, although today having a few issues. This won't matter if you're listening after the fact, but we'd love to have you join us live. We'll put those instructions in the chat room, but in that chat room to log in, bottom left-hand corner, it'll say log in, select that, choose the guest account, put your name in where it says guest, and then hit submit, and that'll put you right in the chat room. About 30 of you out there today, and that's the best way to get your questions in live. If you're listening to the recorded version or you need custom strengths coaching solutions for small, medium, or large organizations, we do that as well. Send us an email, coaching@gallup.com. And of course, don't forget to visit the Gallup Strengths Center, just gallupstrengthscenter.com, for all your coaching resources and Strengths Finder training needs. You can also catch the video and both streaming and now downloadable audio for offline listening. Many of you are doing that as well. Out at our coaches blog, our almost 1 million views, Micah, coaches blog, out at coaching.gallup.com. Micah Librant is our host today. She's one of my favorite I shouldn't say that with Jacque here, learning and development consultants here at Gallup. And Micah, always great to see you and welcome to Theme Thursday.
Thanks. You know what? I think we can share the love. So I can be your favorite learning and development consultant because Jackie's my favorite coach.
Awesome.
So it all just works out.
Micah, welcome to Season 3. We've got a lot ahead for us for Season 3. Let me get a little housekeeping out of the way. We have created new companion guides for you for those, and they'll be ready starting Monday. So if you've registered already for Season 3, we'll drop those in the Eventbrite invite for that. You'll be able to pick those up next week. Brand new, redesigned, all new companion guides. We're going to talk a little bit about what those will have in them a little bit today. And actually, as for just our listeners, if you want to get a peek at it, head out to coaching.gallup.com, look in the Theme Thursday section. And I actually snuck it out there, Mike. I didn't tell anybody. So just for our listeners today, they can download Achiever, which was what we'll do next week. And you can see the format today if you want. Today, we're not doing that. Micah, why don't you take a second and welcome our guest and we can get started.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Jim. It is so great to be back here for Season 3. I think about the awesome foundation that was laid for us originally by you and Kurt and all the great work you did with this simple idea of, hey, what if we just talked intentionally about these themes once a week? And maybe we could call it Theme Thursday. And here we are. What's 68 episodes later, right? With Season 3. So what we're hoping to do this season is kick off where we've left off, pick up where we've left off. Again, the same purpose, the same intention of any of these times that we're together is just to make sure that as a community of strengths coaches and strengths enthusiasts, we're all speaking the same language. I think about that, that when you're with your close friends and you can just exhale and kind of put your feet up and be real, there's such value in that honesty. And I think that honesty comes from shared understanding. So we're just trying to make sure we're all speaking the same language. Our focus in Season 3 is going to be strengths-based leadership, which is one of those areas that I think is incredibly needed. And in a moment when we talk to Jacque, she'll talk a little bit about leadership in general and how strengths can play into that. But certainly one of those places where we have to make sure we're all aligned in our approach so that we can really be I think, confident that we are coming from the best place possible in terms of CliftonStrengths and human potential, and laying that as a lens on top of leadership. There's such potential and I think such need in the world for it. So we're super excited to get to talk about that this year. Today, to kick off the season, we are going to make sure that we open up in a real clean way rather than just diving in with Achiever, which is what we'll be doing next week. We really want to set the scene so that we understand what is Gallup's understanding around leadership. What do we already know? What are some of the tools that are out there that you probably already have your hands on if you're a coach, or tools that you're out there that maybe you've heard other people talk about? And what's the best way that we can know what we already have access to and make the most of what's there? The reason that we have, I'm thrilled to have Jacque Merritt here with us today. When I first started working at Gallup, I worked in Omaha at the Riverfront campus there. And Jacque's office was right across from mine, but I didn't have a whole lot of close interaction with her. I just knew her as this incredibly smart person who popped in and out of this office, and every time I caught her eye, I knew she was thinking about something. That's one of the things that I admire most in any coach, but specifically in Jacque, is her thoughtfulness. She's got this incredible open mind about her that I think leads her clients to better places. And she internally for us at Gallup actually leads quite a lot of our education so that we can improve our craft as coaches. Jacque's here to help us talk about leadership, help set the stage for season 3. Jacque, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Micah. That was a great introduction. And I love hearing about this coaching community idea. I host a coaching club with our colleagues in the UK and Europe, and every month we get together and talk about coaching topics. And it feels like that. It feels like we're kicking our feet up and having pizza and drinking wine together. And then I've also got another circle of friends, Gallup coaches and ex-coaches, where we go on retreat every year and just talk about coaching. That's what we do to have fun. And that's coming up in a couple weeks. So you've just kind of made me recognize that that's what this is. And I love being a part of it. Thanks.
Awesome. Well, Jacque, hopefully I didn't send you pizza or wine, but man, I really messed up there.
It's a little early for wine. I have some tea though. So
all right. Well, that's good. Well, we have some listeners who might be in the right time zone for wine.
Right.
If you're not, you feel like that's better, just pause it and come back once it's cocktail hour. But hopefully we can still cook up our feet and have a great conversation today.
Yeah.
Would you mind just introducing yourself to us? Tell us a little bit about what you believe you're paid to do and your top 5.
Yep. So Jacque Merritt, paid to grow people, whether that's clients or people internally that are kind of emerging as coaches. I really just love investing in people and figuring out how to explore their talents and help them make discoveries in ways that make them more effective in their life and their work. I've been at Gallup for a long time. I kind of lose track. It's like when you get to a certain age, you kind of forget what age you are. Well, at Gallup, after you've been here for a while, you kind of forget how long it is. But somebody reminded me the other day, it's been 28 years. So I've kind of grown up here, and I started as what we called an analyst. So in the old days, we used to put people together the old-fashioned way by asking them questions and listening for themes, and then kind of adding up what those themes are and putting those patterns together and sharing them back with people. So I've been doing that for 28 years here in a lot of different places. I've lived in Singapore for a few years, lived in or worked in our Irvine office for a few years, lived in Laguna Beach, have traveled extensively through Gallup. I'm really thankful for that. So I've worked a lot in the Middle East. I had a client in Saudi Arabia for about 10 years. So I have a few abayas in my closet. I love working and meeting people from different cultures. I have connectedness, as you can maybe tell from that. I think people with connectedness a lot of times like to connect with people from different cultures and maybe see the world as very holistic. I also have focus. I have woo. And I have maximizer.
Excellent. Gosh, just a wealth of, I think, good connectedness here that we get to make the most of. Thanks again.
Yeah.
Jacque, would you mind just telling us, I mean, you work with a lot of leaders, you work with a lot of executives, and all over the world even. What's your perspective on leadership today?
Well, today is an interesting day, it being the day before inauguration. So I'm not going to talk politics. I could. At Gallup, we try not to talk that publicly. But I think it's a really interesting time in leadership. And this all may change, because I see it changing just rapidly. I think it is so hard to be a leader today. And if you read any of Gallup's other publications like State of the American Workforce or State of US Women in the Workplace or our Millennials Report, you'll see that the workplace is drastically changing and leaders are just scrambling to keep up with everything. So you pick up any, Harvard Business Review or Fast Company or something like that, and they're writing a lot about working as in a matrix organization. A lot of leaders are leading teams that are matrixed across the globe. There's a lot of remote workers now. I think in our most recent report, maybe 43% of people report that they work remotely part of the time. So a lot of leaders I work with are really challenged by, how do I keep people engaged when I'm not with them every day? I think millennials are putting different demands on leaders, and they're asking for more coaching. I think the power structure has changed quite a bit. Companies are no longer as hierarchical as we've seen in the past. It's a lot more about collaborative leadership, and companies are reinventing some of their organizational structures. I think Zappos is a good example of that, where I can't remember what they call it, maybe a holacracy. Have you heard that word before?
Like a connected, collaborative
Yeah.
holacracy. That's cool.
Yeah. Yeah. So they've removed a lot of the structures and have more self-governing teams. So I think that changes the role of people that had traditionally thought of themselves of, I'm the leader, and it's made a lot more people leaders. So I think that makes the demands on leadership a lot more complex. And so the questions that I'm getting today from people in leadership roles are quite a bit different than the ones that I got in the past. Now people are, asking about, how do I be more of a coach? How do I be more collaborative? How do I reach people virtually? So I think the landscape is shifting dramatically. And I read an article, I think it was last year or the year before, in Fortune, that kind of stuck with me. It was by Jeff Colvin. And I think the article is called Humans Are Underrated. And he was talking about how we've really dramatically shifted from the industrial age to the knowledge age. And now he said we're in the human age. Right? So that puts a lot of different kind of demands on leaders to be more human, right? And he said in the past, it was more about what you knew as a leader, kind of being the smart person in the room. And now it's really less about what you know and more about what you're like how you show up as a person. And so I think leaders before maybe didn't feel like they had to show their full self at work. And I think people are saying, hey, I want to see all of you. I want to see you authentically.
Gosh, that's hard.
Yeah, it is. It is. And I think another thing that we've seen this at Gallup too, historically, through our Gallup poll research on presidential approval ratings, is that we like our leaders more when they're vulnerable. So if you look at some of the presidential approval ratings, their approval went up when they did something that wasn't that made them vulnerable, right? And so I think, leaders in the past kind of felt like they had to be everything to everybody, and they kind of had to shield people from their real selves. And if you look at the research, it really says, no, we want to like our leaders, and we like them better when we can see them as vulnerable people. And so I think a lot of people that I coach struggle with that a little bit. Like, how can I be vulnerable but still be strong?
It's almost like being, stuck between two worlds of how do I be the stoic person who's got it all together and still be authentic and myself and show that there's some chinks in my armor.
Yeah. Yeah.
What role do you feel like we play with CliftonStrengths? What's the connection between strengths and that kind of desire or need to be authentic?
Well, I mean, as hard as it is to be a leader, I think it's really easy now to be a coach. I'll say, I'm seeing the field emerge so much more because I think leaders are saying, I need a little help here. And I think the strengths movement is part of that. And I think that, more than ever now, strengths is a tool that we can use to help people kind of unlock and find a language to get to know themselves better. And so, we talk about StrengthsFinder helps people find their power and edge. And if you think about, like, in the past, leaders used to have that, formal power. It was granted to them by their role. Now they have to find their personal power because they might be, managing in a matrixed environment. So they really have to figure out, where's my strength? Where am I at my best? What's my competitive edge? And I think StrengthsFinder is a way to help them discover that. And so knowing yourself is, I think, one of the most important demands of being a leader. Just really looking in the mirror and thinking about, what do I bring to the table? Where can I add value? How am I different than other people? What makes me unique? Where do I mess up? Where do I need to ask for help? I think strengths is a tool, and the best tool. I mean, there's a lot of tools out there, I think, that do a great job of kind of taking snapshots of people from different angles. But I feel like the StrengthsFinder gets that whole scan of you, so you can see, what you can lean into, where you need support, where you need to develop some skills. So I think we're really at an advantage. I think all of us on the phone are, either certified strengths coaches or interested in strengths coaching or interested in the tool itself. And I think it's a great way to unlock somebody. I was coaching, and I'll say another thing about strengths. I was coaching somebody yesterday. He worked for a bank, and he had been trained in our ASC program, fresh graduate, not certified yet, not done any coaching yet, but he was getting prepared to coach at the executive level in the bank. So he had a president and the president's team that he needed to work with. And I thought, he'd been in the class for 4.5 days, and I thought he would come out kind of understanding how to plug strengths in and have those conversations with executive leaders. And his question was really basic. And he said, how do I get into conversation with leaders about their strengths? Because it seems so weird just to, like, knock on their door and say, can I have a conversation with you about your StrengthsFinder? I mean, at the leadership level, that kind of feels random, I guess. And he was saying, like, how do I create that conversation with a leader around their strengths and make it meaningful for them? And I had to remind him that the tool, the StrengthsFinder tool, should not be the center of the conversation. The person should be the center of the conversation. So anytime we coach somebody, we should start with the person first, and what's keeping them up at night, and what are their challenges, and what are their opportunities, and what are their goals. And bringing strengths into that just gives a language to have a conversation with somebody, and hopefully to create some openings for them, maybe on topics that they wouldn't normally go into, or awareness that they wouldn't normally have about themselves. So I think the light bulb went off for him, like, oh my gosh, it's not about the tool. It's not about, I have to do these StrengthsFinder conversations. It's really about using the tool as a way to have that conversation, but start with the person first. And so when I think about how the StrengthsFinder kind of fits into the landscape of leadership, I brought a prop. So this is mine. This is not Gallup's. So here's kind of the model that I use, and you'll see, can everybody see that?
Hold it up just a little bit.
Up.
There we go. Perfect.
Okay. So you'll see different versions of this. If you Google, like, coaching frameworks, you'll see different models that look kind of similar with these circles. But in the center of the circle, it's leading yourself, right? So the conversation starts with, who are you as a person? What are your values? What are your strengths? What do you want to get better at? And then the circle right outside of that is relationships. So how do you as a person best connect with the people around you, and how are they different than you? And then how do you manage your team? And then what are you doing to manage your organization? And how does the marketplace come into that? So I think about, this is the landscape of leadership, right? It's all the kind of territory that we have to cover with a leader as we have the conversations with them. But we start in the center, and then we think about how do you engage the strengths of your best partners? How do you engage the strengths of your team? How do you show up with your team if you're high futuristic and you're leading a team that's not? How do you need to talk to them differently, or where might you lose them because you're always talking about vision and they want to know what's important today? And so then you get to that organizational kind of circle, and you think about, like, how does this leader lead the vision of the organization? How do they think about strategy? How do they talk about mission? How do they communicate to all their different constituencies? And then when you get to that outer circle of the marketplace or the community, how does that leader bring what's inside? Like, are they going to programs outside of their organization? Are they talking to other leaders? Do they sit on other boards? How are they innovating? Where are they getting their ideas from? What's the competitive landscape look like? And so those are kind of the conversations that you can get into with leaders around their strengths. And I think strengths is just a great common thread that strings through all of that landscape of leadership.
I like the number of how questions you just posed for us, because I feel like when we work with StrengthsFinder, we always talk about it's not what you do, it's how, and maybe sometimes why you do it. It just seems like you've added like a rocket booster on the end of somebody's strengths profile to lay it in that sort of perspective. Sometimes I think that we can start with strengths pretty strongly rather than starting with the person. And one of the ways I've seen that done is through our domains of leadership.
Yep.
And the 4 domains is what we're hoping to talk about throughout season 3. Could you just give us an overview of what's the best way to understand those domains? Where'd they come from? What do they really mean to a coach?
That is a great question. I think that is maybe one of the most misunderstood frameworks that we use. And I want to take you backwards before I take you forward so that you can kind of see where it emerged from. So the first time people saw it was probably in that strengths-based leadership book. So StrengthsFinder existed before the framework did. And if any of you go back to that book now, Discover Your Strengths, which was the first strengths book, we had a different framework there. Instead of influencing themes, I think we called them impacting themes, and the themes kind of landed in different places. So if you go way back to when I started working with Gallup and started studying people, we had frameworks back then too. We had kind of a 5-bucket framework instead of a 4-bucket framework. So as we were sizing people up, we thought about them in terms of what motivates you, how do you influence people, what's your work style look like, how do you build relationships and engage people, and how do you set direction, right? So a lot of us who've been here for a really long time, those are kind of the buckets that we think of. And so some of the people that, had that in mind were some of the people that put the domains together on the strengths-based leadership. In that model, it was about, I think, 2007. I talked to Jim Asplund about it the other day just to get my story straight. But he said basically what they did to create the domains, they weren't, the research wasn't specific to leadership on the domains. Basically what they did is they took all the themes and did a factor analysis. And when you do a factor analysis, it's basically just clustering the themes together. And so we came up with these 4 clusters, and there were a number of themes that you could have put in different buckets because they kind of matched all the different domains. So there's 4 domains: executing, influencing, relationship building, and strategic thinking. And so they sat together in a room and they moved some themes around just so conceptually it made sense, right? And so that's really where the domains came from. So when you think about using that as a way to gain more self-awareness, it's a great place to start, but it's not a good place to finish. So by saying it's a great place to start, it does give you a nice snapshot of where your power is. So let's say you have like 3 of your 5 themes in the influencing domain. Well, maybe that's where you've got some edge. That's where your competitive edge is. But let's say you have nothing in the relationship building domain. People get worried about that, right? And they think, oh my gosh, I must not be relating to people. And I just want to like dispel that and say everybody relates to people, everybody builds relationships, everybody executes and gets work done, everybody thinks strategically, everybody influences. We just do it in different ways. So I think that when you look at the domain report, you have to think about it as the starting place, but then you think about the domains have short walls in between them. You can jump themes over the wall. And you can kind of think about how they operate in all the different domains. So it's not, I think people get stuck in the domains and they think that there's some certain patterns that are better to have as a leader than others. And, I'll say what I normally say on a coaching call to a leader who has their domain report. I'll tell them, there's no dream themes. Like there is no specific set of themes or theme that correlates more strongly with leadership impact than any of the other themes. Like there's no value to any one theme over another. So leaders come in all different packages. And the other thing I think that people get hung up on is they have certain themes. They kind of have a bias toward those themes and they think, oh, I have to have strategic as a leader, or I have to have futuristic. I mean, I hear that all the time. In fact, I was coaching a team who were in charge of strategy for a huge organization, and not all of them had strategic. And so the ones who didn't have it were really nervous. It made them very vulnerable to put their full reports out there for their peers to look at, because you could see that they didn't have that strategic theme very high. But I think what was amazing is that people saw them as very brilliant. They saw that they did think strategically, but the strategic thinking came from a different place. It maybe came from a different theme, like context or input, or maximizer can be very strategic. So I think the framework helps you kind of think about the different areas that a leader has to play in, but then you can move the themes around. So I brought with me, here's my other prop. You're going to see my really crazy cheat sheet here. So when I look at, and I have the name folded over here, but this is a real person who I coach. It's a leader. And you'll see how I bucket the themes. Like I do it the old fashioned way. So here I'm looking at where does his motivation come from? So I kind of look at the top 10 themes and I see his motivation in some ways comes from self-assurance. It comes from his intellection, his ideation, his learner, right? And so that's kind of the way I think about it. Like if you've got a lot of thinking themes, maybe that's where your motivation comes from. I remember Kurt Liesfeld saying that he used his input to relate to people. That was a relationship building theme for him. It's how he connected to people. So I think that's how we can play around with the themes in a less structured way. I think the domains, like everybody likes a framework. Frameworks give us a way to think about things. But we don't want to get stuck in it so deeply that it becomes a limiting thing for us, rather than something that allows us to really make discoveries around how do I influence, or how do I execute, or how do I build relationships. Does that make sense?
So it totally does. I think that's awesome. Just for clarity, did you map out that person before you talked to them, or is that how you take notes as you're talking to them? What was that like for you?
I always do it before I talk to them. So if I'm doing what maybe we say don't make assumptions, but I'm reading through their insight report, and the insight report always tells me so much about that person. And so I have to make my mental map to kind of know what I'm going into, and to be able to play out some of those hypotheses. And then also, I think with leaders, sometimes, well, the people that we coach sometimes don't want to be on the phone with us because they went through a program for their organization and they have to have a coaching session, right? So they show up and they're kind of like, tell me what I need to know. So we have to establish instant credibility with them. And one way to do that is to kind of throw some of this at them, and to say something to them that says, I know you. I don't really know you, but I know you. So I will always go into their LinkedIn profile too, and I'll do my homework there. I'll see if there's any videos that I can look at on YouTube that give me a feel for how they talk or what they write about, so that I can quickly connect that to their strengths profile. Like, I was coaching this leader, he was a CEO, and he had this whole write-up on his organizational website about his values. And that's pretty much his whole pitch, was his values. And so when you went to look at his strengths, he had in his top 10 responsibility, belief, and connectedness. That's kind of like the triple thread of values themes. And so I was able to play that back to him, and he was like, oh, yeah. And it validated for him that the tool captured his, who he was. And then he was able to see how he expresses that through his leadership without even thinking about it, which is what we do when we're working from our talents.
That's fantastic. So would you say that these 4 domains are sort of a way to think about who they are as a whole person? Does every leader need to do those 4 things, and then it's a how you get there question? Or simplify my question, Micah, what's the value of the 4 domains?
I think it's all of the above. I think it helps people to have a way of thinking about the themes in action, right? So, and not just leaders, I think it's anybody. Now we've kind of, socialized it to the world, and it's not just a leadership framework. It's really about, how do you as a person build relationships? How do you execute? How do you influence? How do you think and process and make decisions? So it's a starting point for a question as a coach to help people discover around that, because everybody does all of these things. So any framework you use, I think, is helpful as a way to think about, how do you activate on these themes? How do they show up in these different areas of your life?
That's excellent. And again, I love that it's in that how question, because it really allows people to individualize their experience and speak from their own talent.
Yeah. Yeah.
Jacque, just one sort of final way to wrap this up. Do you think there's any myths that we need to dispel in terms of leadership and coaching and strengths and how it comes across? Is there anything you feel like we're missing that we need to be better about getting more right?
Well, I think we all still get trapped in, I mean, I've already said it, but we all still get trapped in that image of a leader. Like, if you go back in history, it's kind of the great man theory of leadership, thinking that you have to be this kind of strong, well-spoken, commanding presence, influential. And really, when I study leaders, very few of them are like that. They're real people, and they get up in the morning and feed their kids, and they're you and me. They're not any different. They may have different responsibilities, though, and they may have different things that keep them up at night. But from a strength standpoint, I don't think you're going to see patterns there that are predictive of, whether or not you can judge, is that person a good leader or not. So that's probably one of the myths, maybe. One of the things we haven't talked about with leadership, and I think it'll come up in your theme Thursday, if people are going back and looking at that strengths-based leadership book, there's another framework in that book. Some research that we did around the needs of followers, where we asked thousands of people, why do you follow the leader that you follow? And this is a construct that a lot of the leaders I coach, they really resonate with this. So here's one that I use a lot. The 4 needs of followers are hope, compassion, stability, and trust. So those are the 4 things that people are looking for leaders to provide for them. You know, are you creating hope? Are you providing stability? Are you showing compassion? Are you building trust? And I just had a leader yesterday send me a communication that he was going to share with his organization. And he just said, you know, what do you think? Because that was one of his commitments, is that he was going to do more of this communication, because he hadn't done much of it and people really wanted to hear from him. And so we ran it through the 4 needs of followers kind of as a filter. And he hit every one of them except compassion. And that's, you know, if you look at his style as a leader, that's probably pretty reflective of who he is. But we said, gosh, if people need that, and it's kind of less natural for you to do that authentically, where can you get that from? And so he looked at his profile and kind of searched around, and he got it from his context. And so he put another little thing in his communication, just recognizing the past and where people had been and the struggles that they'd been through to get to where they got today. So I think that's always a good reminder to people that, you know, whatever talents you have, you know, if you're doing those 4 things, you're doing pretty good.
I love that. I think that those 4 needs, again, a fantastic framework that you can open up with and then say, how are you going to get there? It makes it accessible, I think, for people to individualize it.
Yeah, and in that book, if you use the code in that book, you actually get a report that maps your top 5 strengths to each of those 4 needs. So it tells you, if you're an achiever, tells you how do you do each of those 4 things, and gives you some great ideas to build that bridge. You know, I think about strengths as our talents are kind of the bridge that we walk on to get to where we want to go. And so you can walk on any of those 34 talents to get to any of those places.
Mm.
I think that's another thing I think that we can help our clients to discover, is that if you're working in an organization that already has a leadership framework, and you know they have their 10 competencies or their 15 demands of leadership, or whatever they call them, each of the themes can map to all of those. So, and when we've actually done that with the Strengths Finder, we've been asked by a very large organization to map all of our strengths to all of their competencies, so they can put a neat little, you know, workbook in people's hands to say, if you have woo, here's how you can build your business acumen, right? And you think, gosh, those 2 don't go together, but they do. You know, woo people do it differently.
That's excellent. Thanks for the illustrations there. Jim, what kind of questions do we have?
Yeah, we've got a few questions. Micah, of those 4 items we just discussed, are we going to talk about that during the season for Theme Thursday?
Yeah.
So how are we going to talk about it?
Excellent. So if you've logged on and taken a sneak peek at our companion guide, you'll notice that we're actually going to have that be part of the companion guide. What we'd like you to really do as you're watching our season episodes this year is listen for stability, listen for compassion, listen for hope and trust, so that you can tune your ear into those needs of followers specific to each theme. So we've got a place that you can take some notes. We'll talk about it explicitly, but I'd also like you just to keep that sort of bug in your ear of, what am I hearing? We're bringing back our guests in season 3, so you'll get to hear from a leader for all 34 themes, and just listen for, gosh, how do they use that theme to provide any one of these 4? You might hear stability really obviously. You know, anytime I coach leaders with consistency, there's an easy link to see, wow, if you do everything the same every single time, then that creates stability. It's a little bit more direct, but you might find something that surprises you, like what Jacque mentioned, using context to link to compassion. It's another way, I think, for us to remember that our strengths are the how, and these needs of followers might be the what, might be the outcome that we're aiming for.
A couple reminders too, when we think about the book. If you've purchased the book and you haven't used the code in the back of it yet, you can take that code to the site that's in the book, log in, put the code in. It will ask you as you're logging in, do you want to import your results or get new ones? And you want to say import. You want to take your current top 5 and map them directly into that tool. And then the reports that Jacque mentioned will be available to you through that site. That's the way it goes. So you do need to purchase a book with the code in it. Go out there, import that, and it'll give you access to those codes. Mike, I have a feeling that's going to be a question we're going to get a lot during the series. So I'll just we'll remind everybody that week, each week that we do that it's available. Jacque, let's go back. You said a statement earlier about vulnerability and leadership, and we're talking a lot about millennials when we think about that. What are your thoughts about Gen X, baby boomers? Same thing, different? How is that in your opinion, how is that vulnerability viewed through the lens of a different generation?
Well, I think, I mean, I'm probably talking anecdotally and not from a research standpoint, but I would say that the millennials are demanding more of that vulnerability. Baby boomers probably, I'm a baby boomer. Baby boomers probably have a little bit of a tougher time with it just because we didn't grow up with kind of let it all hang out like that. But I think that's why it's tough, right? Because it's the millennials demanding that maybe of the baby boomers who kind of aren't ready to be that. But I think there's that such a movement, and you see it now, I think in the political climate, people want to see real. They want to see normal. They don't want to see somebody up in an ivory tower. They want to be able to touch them, feel them, relate to them in a way that we never demanded before.
We just put out a big, gigantic millennials report that is out there. Although I'm an Xer, and I be honest with you, I want everything the millennials want. So
yeah,
I kind of go cross green on some of that sometimes when we label these generations. A lot of the things the millennials want are just advanced things that our culture as an Xer or even as a boomer was not ready for. And so some of the ideas of, when we think about flex scheduling and open work environments and high flexibility and, some more of those family values and that work-life integration that we call it here. Hey, I want those things too. Like I'm as an Xer, I want them too. So I'm always really careful as we think about these themes. And this is a question I get all the time too, these themes in the context of generations. And we do have a little bit of data on that posted out at Gallup.com. But sometimes the way we started off the conversation was you don't want to be careful to box somebody in too early in the coaching conversation. We don't want to do that through domains, and we definitely don't want to do that through generations, right? We want to hear what they have to say and then begin to make those steps with them. And because I think it's a dangerous precedent to just start with something in mind. Jacque, we had some questions. You held up that sheet, I think, that had that person with their 34 and some mappings. Someone had some question. Can you talk just maybe in a minute or two a little bit more about how you your process of digging into that? Oh boy, let's see. We back?
Yeah,
we're still
here. Did you lose me for a second? Okay. Everything kind of froze up here for a second. So can you just real quick, when you sit down and you're about ready to go in a coaching session, you're going to start your own maps, kind of walk us through a 1-minute version of kind of how you do that.
Okay. So I ask myself what motivates that person, and I look at their top 10 because really that's the only assumption I can make is that their top 10 is dominant. And so I'll pull into that category whatever themes I think really contribute to that based on what I've read in their insight report. So it might be it might be woo motivates them, right? They just like to meet people. So I'll just make some assumptions there. What I probably won't land in motivation maybe is strategic or something like that. Unless, and in the conversation, it may come out that does motivate them, but I don't start there. So I look at motivation. I look at how they think and process information. And I might throw even like focus in there. I might throw maximizer in there because that tells me how they filter what's important. Then I look at relationships. And when I'm thinking about relationships, I might throw responsibility in there because that tells me they build a lot of trust, a lot of loyalty in their relationships. I'm also looking at influence as a category. So I'm thinking about how do they influence, and not just looking again at the influencing themes. I might throw in ideation because they influence through ideas, or I might throw in individualization or strategic because they're really smart about how they push people's buttons to influence them. And then I'm looking at work style. How do they get work done? Are they organized? Are they consistent? Are they fluid and flexible? Do they juggle a lot of balls, or are they more just focused on one thing at a time? So I'm just trying to frame that person through those categories. But you could use the domains in the same way and kind of ask the same questions, but just jump some of the themes over the wall by looking at that insight report.
Okay, good explanation. You want to add anything to that, Tamika?
I was just going to say what she just described is something we teach in that accelerated coaching course about being a strength scientist. You're not a doctor who's diagnosing, but you are coming up with a theory, allowing yourself to explore and build a hypothesis of a person, and then ask great questions to test that hypothesis. So if that's never been clear before, just rewind to what Jacque just said.
No, for sure. There's been some questions about the companion guide. We've actually given you a sneak peek to it for the season on the website today. So when we're done here, if you head over, there's a theme Thursday companion guide section right there on the coach's blog. And you'll see Achiever is available for next week right now. Now, I haven't told nobody in social. This is it's crazy, my gift to you. But go out there right now and download that. Micah, while they're looking at that, can you give us a peek as we think about this year's or this season's companion guide? What's the best way for people to process through that?
Apparently it's Jim's, and he's taken all the credit and just wrapped it in a bow and given it to you. Fantastic.
Yikes.
No, the companion guide is going to be excellent. I think about this season as being a really great intimate book study that we all get to do together. If you wanted to treat it that way, you'd pick up the Strengths-Based Leadership book. But also it's bigger than that. It's how do we stay relevant and stay current and talk about it over and over again for most of the entire year. So we're going to study leadership in the context through the lens of strength. And to make the best use of that companion guide, download it and read the theme definition before the episode. And so what I would suggest doing is go out right now. It's going to be available on Monday. Also, check out our coaching blog this year because Al Winsman has done something pretty amazing that I'm not going to give away, but every Monday you'll get to read a post from Al about the theme of the week. So if you just put it on your calendar to go out to coaching.gallup.com on a Monday, you'll be able to find Al's blog about that theme of the week, as well as the companion guide. And that will help familiarize yourself with what is the definition, what is the essence of this theme. If you haven't watched seasons 1 or 2 of Theme Thursday, that would also be a great thing to do as some pre-work to get you ready for our Thursday webcast. That will hopefully make sure that we're all speaking a foundation of what is this theme and what does it really mean? Because there is some truth and some myth to some of these themes, and there's a right definition. From there, what we'll do on Thursday is we will follow that companion guide the same way every time, even though consistency is number 37 for me, but we will do it the same way every time. What I'll do is I'll give you an overview of the theme, just in case you haven't done your pre-work, and then we'll stretch it. We'll start to think about how do we build upon that foundation of understanding and imagine what might be different about that theme if you're a leader of people. So what's that sort of leadership extension and what might that look like? We'll follow the companion guide on the front, and then we'll have a guest who is a leader with that theme in his or her top 5. And I'll just get to spend some time interviewing that person, much like we did with Jacque today. Spoiler alert, all of our leaders who we have lined up already, I've sent them a couple questions and they're pretty simple. What does this theme look like for you in your role? When has it shown up? So give us an illustration of what it looks like. What's the value of this theme as a leader, and what do you hope people really understand in order to appreciate and help grow it in a leadership capacity? So the companion guide, if you're getting a whole group of people together, print off a bunch of copies of that companion guide, and that'll be your work page that you can walk through. If you're a coach who's watching this on your own or who's listening to this after the fact, print off those companion guides or save them somewhere and come back to them. They're not filled out with all the answers because we don't have all the answers. A lot of that's going to come from listening to and getting to know the people within these themes. So we're going to help you build your poster child of what does greatness look like in all 34 of these themes. So we encourage you to take notes, to ask questions, and to really get inside these themes and understand them and love them a little bit more.
Yeah, no, and we will include that in that Monday post. We'll include links to season 1 and season 2 if you want to go back. We'll include the link to the companion guide, which we heard you and we made it easier to get access to this year. So you should have an easy way to do that. We really want you to share that companion guide around and get people to watch the series. Use it in your coaching. You don't need permission from us. You don't need permission to pass that guide along. Spread it around, use it, share it, take advantage of it. Jacque, before we go, my last question to you. When we talk about domains, oftentimes we think about domains also in the context of teams. And so when we think about the work we do with teams and the work we do with leaders, how do you see those as being the same or the different? I'll give you 1 minute to answer that question.
Oh my gosh, that's a whole season of
probably is. It came up in chat.
Oh my gosh. So, I mean, we use it obviously with teams. It's such a great tool to get a snapshot of where your power as a team is, and who plays what role best. So I think that's where the beauty is it opens up a team to have a different kind of conversation. But just like when you use it with an individual, I work with teams, maybe they don't have a lot of, let's say they don't have a lot of relationship building themes. How do they then cover that base, right? Using some of the talents of the people on that team can again jump into that domain and fill that domain. In the book, it says you like to have a team that has balance across all 4 domains, so that all your bases are covered. I think that's a little bit of an idealistic ask. I think you're always going to have gaps. And I think it's the same as when you're an individual. You can't be everything to everybody. So you have to reach beyond that team, which is pretty easy to do these days with all the collaboration and matrix organizations. So thanks, Jim.
All right, very good. Jacque, thanks for coming out. Micah, any final thoughts before we go?
Super excited. Thank you so much, Jacque, for kicking us off and a wonderful education session. This has been such a treat. And Jim, well done keeping your cool when things are changing. And to all of our folks out there in the chat room, anybody who shared this, you are doing, I think, the world a service. This is all how we come together and we help each other love what we bring to the table a little bit more. I've got high positivity, so it sounds cheesy, but I really do mean that this is our mission, is to help people find their own mission and live it out loud a little bit more authentically.
Yeah. Micah, thank you for the work that you did. We've done a ton of work since October to put this, including a team, our learning team, Angela and Barb, and Barb's out there in the chat room today, did a tremendous job of putting those guides together. And so, ladies, thank you for your work on that, as well as our design team giving us all this great looking stuff that we put together. So a lot of resources available for you. And just a reminder, we have a lot of new folks here watching Theme Thursday for the first time. We record and produce and make available everything. So as soon as this video is done on this page, it'll be available in rerun. So you can just click stop, hit refresh, hit play, and the whole thing is there for you on this page. If you haven't caught the previous seasons, everything's available on our coaches blog, coaching.gallup.com. We'll remind everyone to take full advantage of all the resources we have available at the coaches at Gallup Strength Center, actually, gallupstrengthcenter.com. I mentioned if you have any questions or comments, any things you want to bring into us, send us that email. Micah mentioned it in chat, but coaching@gallup.com is the best way to get that in. They'll route that around to me if that's a question for me. You get access on our coaches blog to our Facebook group, YouTube page, all the iTunes and RSS feeds, iPhone and Android apps, everything we talked about. Our Monday post for Theme Thursday, you're going to want to get access to that. It's all available on our coaches blog. Go to coaching.gallup.com. One final reminder that we are doing a little tiny summit this summer. Actually, it's going to be gigantic, and you're going to want to be there. It's going to be July 17th, 18th, and 19th. And if this is the first time you've heard about it, head out to CliftonStrengthsSummit.com and get the details. Early bird pricing ends February 28th. So you want to do that here pretty soon to get that in. If you found this helpful, we'd ask that you share it. I think we said that about 8 million times. Share this with your friends, relatives, neighbors, even the dog. And we thank you for joining us. And with that, we'll say goodbye, everybody.